till my Welcome to Speak Sex. I am your host, Eurydice, and my guest today is a wellness coach who specializes in prenatal and postnatal exercise and also toxic exposure and lots of other things. She's also a certified cobbler, which I find the most charming of all of her many accomplishments. Her name is Ashley Peeler. She's based here in Miami. Welcome to the show, Ashley.
Thanks so much, Yuri, for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. So, I have been, yesterday was Earth Day, and, we're in this weekend where everybody's talking and celebrating, the initiative, of government initiative of at least beginning to address, all of the toxic abuse that we have visited on nature in our kind of narcissistic, understanding of ourselves as users and takers rather than, participants in the whole game, play of life and nature. So, and that feels good. It does seem, however, that, a more systemic change is needed, not just spending some money and changing one source of energy for another, but kind of like a cultural awakening at the personal level where, we might all revisit what we've been taught, about how to be a good human and how to be, a good partner and all of that, what work means, how to create value, and try consciously to think twice before we do anything, because the first response is usually the one we've been taught by modeling, from our ancestors, who took some, who were indoctrinated, pretty hardcore. So yeah, I think it's a wonderful time, when we are alive, because it feels like it has the potential for so much change, if for no other reason out of despair, right? Shared terror at the alternative. Yeah. So I feel like, you do a lot of things. You are one of these women, and there are many of us. And, I think, again, it's part of what gives me hope. There are many of us who, at some point in our careers, decided to make a substantial shift and work, in more heart-based or traditionally, if you want to go by gender stereotypes, feminine fields, right? So if your father was diagnosed with ALS and trying to understand what happened, you learned that it was linked to neurotoxins that were identifiable and avoidable. So your father's suffering and journey became the catalyst for you to change your career and decide to speak up and share what you were discovering about toxins in our household and personal care products and food and water and everyday life, and then you became a mother and everything that you learned through that huge journey. You have also been sharing as a wellness coach, with your emphasis in priest and pre and priest. There's a priestly element, pre and postnatal, experience and habit and ritual. And that goes hand in hand with, the understanding of childbirth as a natural, and healthy experience, for a woman's body that doesn't require, to be medicalized and doesn't anesthetized and supervised by a person who's an MD. Yeah. So I'm open to tackling all this, however you want.
Sure.
And I could ask you, what do you think is the greatest need, in your experience? What are people looking for the most? What are they asking about the most?
So that question, I mean, there's so much that we can talk about, because you've talked about, me and my dad and my career and being a mom and working with pre and postnatal clients. I think a worldwide need is that we have got to stop being selfish, and we have got to start thinking of our planet. I mean, every day should be Earth Day. I know I've heard this so many times, but it's, my work. I've always been an environmentalist since a child. I mean, it started, I don't know what prompted it, probably my love of nature. But we are, in this country, at least, we're in America, we are such a consumer-driven society that we fail to think about the consequences that our consumerism has on our planet. And, it takes are simple, mindful choices to really, I don't want to say turn things around, because that's a little too late, but to make significant choices in our life that can affect climate change, that can affect our environment in a positive way, and that can safeguard a future for our children who are supposed to take care of us. So, it's one thing to have children, but there's a reason why we have children. Not only is it really good for our bodies to have children, our bodies were made to have children, but when I get old, somebody's going to need to take care of me. And if it's not the society that's taking care of me as a whole, then we hope that your child or your children are going to take care of you. And so for me, the immediate need I see, and the immediate need I hear from my clients is, I want to protect my child, or I want to protect the child's future. And it's also our future, because we're still alive. But we have to project. It's kind of like looking at goals. When you create goals for yourselves, you don't just look for today and tomorrow. You should be looking at a more long-term objective. And so what I do in my work as a toxic exposures expert, which is linked to pre and postnatal corrective exercise, is I bring awareness to women not only about the potential daily dangers in their home to their body, but also to the body of their child.
Right.
And then I also help them understand that mothers quickly want to get back to wherever their body was before birth. And they often forget that you've been holding a baby in your body for 9 months. You're holding your body differently. You're breathing differently. You're moving differently. You take the baby out, and then you have to teach the body again how to function without that baby inside it. You think that you just snap back. Okay, well, now I'm babyless, so I'm going to get back to my pre-baby body or pre-baby self, and it's not that easy. You've been using your quads more, your front muscles. You've had your body pushed forward by gravity because the belly is pulling downward, so your spine is holding itself in a different way. Your hip flexors have opened up because you have to prepare the birth canal for the baby to come out. Your rib cage opens up to provide expansion for the baby. So all these things take time to get back to a normal state. Even the way that you press on your feet is changed postnatally. And because we don't have any type of post-rehab care for mothers in this country, women just leave the hospital after completing the most
Wait.
important.
What do you mean by post rehab?
So, okay, so for example, this is, well, in America, birth is often seen as a medical intervention, an operation.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah.
You have a knee replacement, you're going to have probably 6 months of physical therapy.
Yeah.
You just pushed a baby out of your body. There is no post physical therapy. There's no rehabilitation. It's like, okay, go home. You're good. They maybe stitched you up, but your baby's alive and it's healthy, so you can go home now. And then what do? It depends on the person. Maybe 4 weeks in Barry's boot camp, jumping up on boxes when they shouldn't be. Or maybe they use that time then, you know what? I just had a really hard birth. I'm going to eat and drink whatever I want because I'm breastfeeding and I can do whatever I want. And then they also aren't taking care of themselves. Or no one is giving us this advice of what to do afterwards. And that's where I come in, because luckily, well, hopefully, let's say I help them prenatally and then I help them postnatally. I was fortunate enough to give birth in Europe. Not only was my birth free, they were also more pro natural birth. I was in Belgium. Every country's different, but I was in Belgium. I had free physical therapy before birth. I had free physical therapy after birth. I also had a free doula or midwife that I chose, but I didn't have to pay for that. Socialized healthcare took care of that. And so I was lucky enough to have that postnatal rehab, to understand that, you've got to get your body back by teaching your body how to move again without a baby in your belly. And so when I moved back to America 9 years ago, I had been working in consumer protection as a lobbyist in Europe, but that's been 21 years ago. Not since I finished, but it's been a while. But the knowledge base was still there because I still continued to follow chemical exposure and what it was doing to our bodies. And, that was right before I moved back, was when my dad started having symptoms. And then I started doing the research post-mortem. Unfortunately, my father passed very quickly after being diagnosed with ALS. He just wasn't interested in being in a wheelchair or being taken care of. And I started doing the research on, ALS and what's causing this atrophy of the muscular system. And I noticed that bitumen, which is a chemical used in roads, is a neurotoxin and has been linked to ALS. So I started thinking about it, and I knew my dad owned a trucking company. Wow. The trucking company. He was exposed to asphalt on a daily, and we have no regulation in this country.
Yeah.
Europe has regulation on bitumen exposure. And I actually found it through one of the Europa websites within the European Commission. And I found out, okay, this was it. That's what got him. In addition to, my mother has essential tremors. That is which she was diagnosed falsely with Parkinson's. This was when I was in college, only to discover 2 years later by another doctor that she did not have Parkinson's. She had essential tremors. Either way, both of those two illnesses are caused by external toxins. Parkinson's disease is now directly linked to the forever chemicals that are used in Scotchgard, in carpets, and essential tremors are linked to pesticide exposure. And my grandmother's house was next to a neighbor who showed roses. They had 500 different rose sorts. So we always had fresh cut flowers in our house. It was in my grandmother's house, and I lived there with my mom for a couple of years post my mother's divorce. And I realized it was very striking and telling to me already after grad school, after I'd done a master thesis on toxicity and GMOs, that the neighbor, the dad got cancer and died. The son got cancer and died.
Wow. There you
The
go.
daughter got cancer and died.
There you go.
My grandmother had a rare blood disease that's now only linked to glyphosate, Monsanto Roundup. She died. Essential tremors are caused by Roundup.
Yeah. Yep.
So my mother has also, she was exposed to those pesticides for years and years. They would spray the whole yard. It'd end up in their drinking water. They shared the same well. It would end up in their airspace. So when I saw that not only one person in my family had been affected directly by chemical exposure, but two, I knew that I needed to take the knowledge that I had by working on legislation to help people be protected from these chemicals. And being a mother and knowing that my son's endocrine system, the system that's responsible for his metabolism, his mood and behavior, his immune system, his reproductive organs, that these were all going to be affected if I expose him to chemicals. I knew I had to continue talking about it. So I've been hosting seminars for now almost 9 years on chemical exposure. I started talking in schools. Then I would talk in companies for lunch and learns. Then I hosted outdoor seminars. Well, outdoors, I mean out of offices for the public. I've talked in, private membership clubs, Soho House, for example. And, it's not that people are really interested when I talk about it. It's just not a sexy topic. Nobody wants to hear that their favorite shampoo could cause cervical cancer, or that a man's deodorant could cause erectile dysfunction. We kind of just want to not even touch it. And the people that are really interested in the conversation are people who have lost family members or mothers, and I'm not, or fathers, but I'm just saying young families who just are having children, and they know, okay, we've got to protect our child, because once you have a child, your priorities, change. It's like, okay, now I have to be the best parent ever. I'm definitely not going to repeat the mistakes of my parents. Does any of this relate, and so they're more open to hearing about, hey, did you know that your toothpaste may be making you sick? Or that cleaning product that you love the smell of because it reminds you of your grandmother, that causes infertility and migraines and ADD. So, to get back to your first question was, what do we need right now? We definitely need to know that chemicals are making us sick, right? Not just our children, but ourselves. And not to wait until you do have a chronic illness, like an autoimmune disorder, or you can't lose weight. And that is also linked to the work that I do with postnatal women, because oftentimes after they breastfeed, after they've been working out and they're eating the diet of a little bird, and they still can't get the weight off, they feel hopeless. Because first of all, our society teaches us that we have to look a certain way. We have to act a certain way. We have to be a certain way as a woman, and then as a mother, and then to have it all, to have our career, we have to be a good mom too. And so we have so many layers of expectations that when we can't lose that weight and don't look like Beyonce post-birth, we question what's wrong with us. But that weight gain, it might be because of the fragrance in your house that you've been using for the last 2 years. And there are very few personal trainers, you want to call them wellness coaches, call them exercise specialists, that know how to help you move, and they might know how to help you eat properly, but they're not looking at stress hormones and how they affect weight gain. And they're not looking at chemical exposure and how that's also causing weight gain. And it's causing a specific type of weight gain. It's a hormonal weight gain, because the chemicals that I am talking about are chemicals like flame retardants, pesticides, fragrances, and a lot of different cleaners and your personal care products. These all have chemicals in them called endocrine disruptors, and which are affecting your endocrine system because they mimic synthetic hormones, they mimic estrogen, and they send a signal to your body when you inhale them or when you put them on your skin or when you ingest them that your body is producing enough estrogen. So it messes with your metabolism, it slows your metabolism down. And for men, it can cause a plethora of problems as well, because men should not be receiving an influx of estrogen in their body either. So it's also causing weight gain for men. And a lot of people just don't know that. And I'm so glad that a lot of them I catch, because I have two postnatal women. They both had babies close to the same age. One's a little over a year, one's a little under a year. And they both have the same issue. They have been eating religiously healthy food. They've been exercising, but they still have some belly weight or belly, or let's say even visceral fat around the belly. But that is definitely linked to hormonal changes in the body. And so when you can target that and when you can identify that properly, then you can really get down to helping someone. Because my work as a pre and postnatal corrective exercise specialist to make sure that moms move safely and help them for birth, and help them post-birth. But at the same time, like I said, a lot of people don't know that these are factors that are inhibiting them from losing weight. And if they don't know that, then they think that they're still doing something wrong with their diet. So they just keep eating less, and then your stress hormones go up, and then so it's a vicious cycle. So that's me in a nutshell.
That's great. Yeah, that was all great. It's, it has a combination of like specific information and details, and of course the greater truth. Yeah. So, the one thing that I kept thinking as you were speaking, is that, yes, all of that's true. A question that I think about a lot, is that one-on-one, if someone actually has the time, the means, the financial means, and the wherewithal to get advice and get help, and then actually remembers to bring up all of these plethora, beautiful word, of potential problems, and discover them and then question them. Actually, so we're talking about unlearning pretty much, the way that we copy each other at existing, which is what we've inherited, which is a lot of unlearning to do. So yeah, if someone does have that, then it's a great luxury, but it is a luxury. And a greater question is, how can we change the system? How can we change, in general, the framework so that we don't have to do so much work per topic? Go back and revisit everything you eat, which is easier said than done because, habit. And then go back and revisit, the way you live, where you live, the air you breathe, indoors, outdoors, the way you move, the way you move your body, the way that you judge your body, the way that you value your body. Do you look at yourself as a sex object? Is that where you get your self-worth? Where, do you look at yourself as a great thinker? Is that where you get your self-worth? Because that's the same patriarchy too, right? So
Sure.
It's like an endless, and I think it's super valid, and I think that everyone has to participate in that. And as you said, especially for the sake of our children, especially to try and not model behavior that they will catch, because it doesn't matter what we advise them with our words, they will do what they watch us do. They will most likely interact with people in their daily lives, in their love lives, in their, eating lives, the way they see us do it. Like the system, it seems to me that the greater problem is this kind of like corporate accounting system that we, our economy, our understanding of our economy is very much based on these valuations of how money is made and what the value of things is, right? So, an obstetrician, a well-known doctor who will facilitate your birth makes thousands and thousands of dollars more than the doula. And a huge corporation has their products all over around you, will ship them overnight. It's so easy and familiar because of their PR departments and advertising, right? Publicity, so all of that. So, and they hire the teams of chemists to put if we discover one chemical, they'll put something else. They'll invent something else. And then even, the stock market, which is how we kind of understand our economy as being healthy, is based on this speculation, again, of profit made off of nature. We don't count how many trees as much as when you cut the trees and use them for something and make stuff out of them. Right, to simplify.
Sure.
And then the government's initiative, the proposal yesterday, mentioned basically giving money tax incentives, which means you have to work and make money to want to take the tax incentive. So you have to work within the system that you just described so beautifully, to get tax incentives to then change the way you produce, energy. But again, it's energy based. There was nothing about, big agro, big farming, how animals are raised. There were no actual penalties for the worst, right, offenders who are abusers of our fellow life creatures, and no comment at all about this extreme, corporate centralization, where in order to get work, to make a living, to be able to afford these basic things that you just mentioned, we have to be close to each other in urban centers or near some supermarket. We can't be growing our own food. Who's going to do everything? We can't be out in, where there's plenty of oxygen, right? So it's the system feeds it on itself. And
sure.
And we fight it, and we have to fight it, at all costs, because as you say, we owe this to ourselves and our family and our children. But it is important to also understand it's not one or another. That's why you do so many things, and you could be doing 100 times more, because
sure.
it's such a systemic, it's a systemic kind of bombardment that keeps us hostage.
So, this is maybe a good current analogy of what you were just talking about, just in a different subject. So, we know of the George Floyd case and the fact that Derek Chauvin, the policeman who murdered him, has been charged with murder. This wasn't just
3 days ago.
This wasn't justice. This was accountability. It's different.
Mm-hmm.
So we can make, as citizens of the world, but particularly of the U.S., since we are both based in the U.S., we can make small steps towards changing this consumeristic lifestyle that we've been living all the time in order to protect ourselves and our families from chronic illness. That does not mean that we are going to change corporations that are creating BPA in plastic, and now it says BPA free, but they've created BPE and BPS, just more endocrine disruptors called something else. However, it's all about education. And so this case that I just mentioned, this murder case that has finally finished and maybe allowed a little bit of time to heal some wounds, it doesn't fix the systemic problem. It's just so, I'm not going to be able to clean Flint, Michigan's water by using cloth diapers on my baby. But I am going to improve the water around me immediately. Any little step that you take to reducing chemical exposure in yourself is directly going to affect me, because the vicious cycle about toxicity of corporations producing the chemicals and of us ingesting, inhaling, absorbing the chemicals is a vicious circle. Anything that you put on your body is going to go into the drain, or anything you eat is going to go in the toilet, and it is going to link up in our aquifers, and it's going to end up in our drinking water. So we could just get the whole U.S. to start filtering their water. They'd be much happier, healthier people just if we just start right there. And that's something that could take place today. Now, I worked in politics, so European politics. I know the ins and outs of how European politics work. I know what goes on in U.S. politics, and we aren't going to be able to save our planet in 4 years. I mean, we needed the first 100 days of a current administration to try to rectify some of the damage done particularly to the environment. But these baby steps are major steps for the environment. It's not just using paper straws now and not using plastic straws. But if we could just stop using synthetic fragrance, that would be a game changer for our water.
Oh yeah, any fragrance or, plastic. If we could just stop using all plastic, I mean, wow, or like, Amazon, like non-stop Amazon boxes or, or even like make choices based on money. I mean, to me, like that's a huge hack, and it's a tough one. It's tough. It could be the toughest one, because it's not just about, if I do this job, which is a job that would make me more money, I will be safer. Even though if I look closely at it, it affects the environment and life. Once again, I participate in that system. But it's not just about money. It's also like the social respect, like we were saying about that doctor, that MD, So you meet someone and you say, what do you do? I'm a doctor. I'm a pediatrician. I'm an obstetrician. What do you do? I'm a doula. Like, who gets respect, Like I felt it so much in my career because like I was a university professor at Brown University, and that was when I had my maximum respect. I'm sure you understand what I'm saying. from society at large, like being introduced to someone. Then I was like a writer, and I wrote for Spain, and I published with like Simon & Schuster. I still got respect, but not the same, right? Then I chose to keep my child, and I switched to like being an artist, and had an art studio here in Miami because I wanted to be with my child. Much less respect. Then I stopped making like collages and painting, and I focused on stitching and embroidering, again in like that whole quest of like, the four mothers and honoring the feminine, like what fiber artist? I mean, like drop, right? But I forget even the podcast. I don't even bring it up. But the worst one was being a mom. which is the hardest work. For me, of everything I've ever done, it was by far the hardest labor, and I was very proud of it, and I did it on my own, and I was very proud of it. And yet, if someone asked me, what do you do? And I said, I'm a mom, it was like the most boring, like run-of-the-mill, and what else? Like, no social respect at all. That was just like taken for granted, not considered work worthy of, appreciating and respecting. And again, it's partly because like no one was paying me to do it, but it's such a much more important contribution, to humanity at large, and I feel it's the same with, like, let's say the doula, or the local farmer who will get no respect. It's like, but they are actually saving us.
So, teachers, mothers,
nurses,
doulas, midwives, they're so under-respected. I mean, regardless if you want children, somebody's got to pay for you when you get older. So, we must have children. Healthy children take care of us. And there's a big problem because this is the first generation, this generation that is being born right now. They're not pandemic babies. They're called Roundup babies. This is the first generation.
Roundup?
Monsanto glyphosate. So they're called Roundup babies because 1 out of every 3 children now have an autoimmune disorder. 1 out of every 3. This is the first population or generation that will not outlive us. That is a problem.
That is horrific.
That's a global problem. That's a pandemic.
That's horrific.
That's an epidemic.
That's a statistic I haven't heard, but that is horrific. If our children or the children born now cannot outlive their parents, that's just unimaginable.
And this is also very country specific. So it's not just happening in the U.S. It's happening in the countries that have lax regulation against chemical exposure. South America, Central America, China, parts of Asia, Europe, Australia, New Zealand. I mean, they're not pure. They're not completely clean. But I think because they are maybe newer countries, and of course Europe is much older than America, but I mean the European Union as a solidified union made steps to protect their citizens by linking up DG Sanko, which is for the health, DG Environment, which is for the environment, REACH, the chemical organization on chemicals, the European Food and Safety Authority, that all 4 of these, in addition, they also work with other DGs, other government bodies within the commission to create legislation that is based on the precautionary principle that we will not sell things on the European market without them being third-party tested, whereas U.S. maintains a completely different policy on legislation. Let's sell a product. If it makes people sick, we'll take it off the market. Now, that's an opinion which one you think is best, but I feel much safer in Europe when I eat, knowing that dairy products have no hormones in them. Beef have no hormones in them or antibiotics linked to those hormones. That phthalates in toys were banned in 2001. It took America almost 6 years when they knew these chemicals were deforming babies. They still allowed toys to be made with this toxic chemical, which is found in fragrance. DuPont, 40 years in the U.S. If you've ever seen Dark Waters, the documentary, it's Aaron Brockovich exonified. I mean, it is sick that a chemical company is still allowed to even function after poisoning 70,000 people in a town and knowing for 40 years that the chemical they were using for Teflon was making people sick, deforming babies in utero of women in their line working for the company. And that court case in 2021 is still ongoing. They are still refusing to pay the people in this little town in West Virginia compensation for poisoning them. So it's going to take more than us.
But
stopping
we're not that far removed. I feel like our foremothers, we're not that far removed from the generation that didn't have that, So if you look back to it, like, okay, the 1950s, it's like post-war, the war changed the American economy. And so post-war with the 1950s, we have both like the shrinkage of the family to like the nuclear family rather than multi-generational, support by the women in the family. The multi-generational usually came with like a little garden, like the Depression era, you're right, gardens, And where I grew up in Greece, there was always the garden, there was always the grandma, and so there was access in that way to the way things were done, the traditional way, which was healthy. We didn't have those products. If you don't have access, you don't have access. We're on a little Greek island that it's not an option. And so you live off the earth, really. And in the 50s and the 60s, there was that huge change with the centralization and building and corporate culture and but still it's so close to us, and we can keep the good, so to speak, and go back to what we had that made sense if we just kind of stop finding the easiest solution. Like let's say the internet gives us access to each other, to more knowledge, and to like small producers of like better options and healthy things again, and also to the knowledge of how to do it for ourselves. If we make this choice of like making less money the normal way and more wealth, by our lifestyle, more wealth for everyone. Yeah, but I in my own like family, for example, generations after generations of like the women gave birth under the olive trees, and they breastfed. And if they run out of milk, my grandma Eurydice, her fifth child, her husband died while she was pregnant, and like she didn't have milk, and she gave my dad to another woman in the town who was breastfeeding at the time. So she, the woman became his nursemaid. That was very common. My mom, which is just a tiny generation. I mean, my mom like was married, with a matchmaker, through a matchmaker. So it's still it was the sexual revolution had happened here, not quite there. But even so, the 50s and 60s had happened. So when my mom gave birth, she was taken to a hospital. A male doctor removed me out of her and put me in an incubator. And then by the time I was out of the incubator, she was scarred, cut and scarred. And by the time I was out of the incubator, they had shown her a powder, the mixed milk powder, formula. Whatever was available that had gotten all the way to the island of Lesbos. And told her, the doctor, told her that A, he saved her life, right? And B, this was better. She didn't need, it was too difficult making milk, and she'd been through a lot, But okay, so it's my generation. I should have, like, when I got pregnant, and I kind of like, the way I think you are like this too. I bought every book, and I kind of obsessed about understanding what this was, what was happening to me and my sense of me. But the first few months, I went to, the best known doctor in New York and then in Miami that my friends could tell me, no one I knew had babies yet. My friends didn't. And then I followed what I was told with like the checkups and whatever, pretty much until the end when an appointment was made, for birth. And I kept insisting natural birth. But there was an appointment made, and something in me felt wrong. And thank the goddess, I had already practiced yoga and mindfulness enough to pick up on instinct, because it's not stuff that you understand. Like I couldn't put in words back then, but I just felt this is wrong. Like I felt, no one told me, but like I cut off my hair because it was dyed. Right, I had this sense. So I found a midwife, and it was, I don't know who told me there was a midwife. It turned out she started the first midwife center of women by a woman in Texas ages ago. By the time I met her, she had a place in Normandy, and she delivered at least 20,000 babies. Then she went on to deliver another 20,000. She moved to Jamaica, and she's an amazing woman. I went to her house, and she was like, this is how you wash your baby. And she pushed aside like all the dirty dishes on her little sink in her kitchen and grabbed the newborn and gave him a bath to show me. And, that alone told me it's not such a big deal. Like, she just, I was like, it's not such a big deal. Like, take it out of your mind, So I showed up to her with my purse, with nothing, like no preparation. I was just like, I'm going to trust her. My doctor, sent me a legal letter that he was not responsible, if I was going to die, and I had to all this scary legal language. So it forced her to like videotape the birth because, for legal reasons. And she put me in the jacuzzi, and my uterus wouldn't dilate. So it took almost 24 hours. She manually dilated it with her fingers, and she used evening primrose oil. She gave me nothing. She gave me like maybe 3 spoonfuls of Jello for the 24 hours until she came out, my daughter, who was late, like 2 weeks late. So I gave birth naturally later than I would have with the doctor at Mount Sinai here. And then she swaddled the kid and gave me a car seat because I did not get one. I didn't have clothes for her. And she like gave me my placenta, which I honor looking back at the time. Again, I had no idea, what to do with this part of my body. But now I honor the fact that this was my body, and she returned it to me instead of like dumping it in the trash, and baby and I went home, and where my dog was waiting. But my point is, it all worked out. Like she taught me how to breastfeed, it all works out. Like if we have faith, like we have faith in God, we have faith in all kinds, science, we had enough faith in our scientists to stay home for a year, right? If we just have faith in nature that our bodies are designed to do this thing, we will live. It feels like a death, but it's just like a rite of passage, it's an honor, I think, it's like a age-old, rite of passage, motherhood, the experience of giving birth. You break out of who you were in that kind of like becoming two, splitting into two, like a plant.
I'm glad that you had that birth experience, because that's not the case with my clients. It's all medical. It's and particularly with COVID.
And I didn't tear. I did not tear. I did not scar. Nothing happened. And my next door neighbor during COVID, next door, right here, she gave birth in her bathtub.
Nice.
With a doula who came over like last August, I'm going to say. So yeah, I mean, we're doing it. We're doing it here in Miami Beach, and it's about assuring each other that it's normal and more normal, like more normal.
I mean, that's what our bodies were made for. And billions of women have given birth before us without medical intervention, without an emergency C-section because the baby seems big. I'm like, what? Like, you don't need a C-section because your baby's 8.5 pounds. That's a completely normal sized baby. And you also don't need a C-section because your baby's turned. You actually can manually, safely move the baby down with physical manipulation. But, it's all about
the doctors want to plan their sessions. The doctors, find it, well, they charge much more, but also, they can know what's happening. They don't like this unpredictability. They don't like getting up in the middle of the night, any of that, right? Yeah. But if you don't go that route, you recover much faster because you don't expose your body to so much trauma. And your baby takes his time. They do work too. Like they consciously travel out in their time, slow or fast, everyone's different. They participate in the pushing out. So their first, they don't have consciousness as we understand it, but their first experience is one that they will. Like they feel they have to go this way and they are trying to go that way. So they're not shocked. They're helped and enabled. And when they come out, they're not, they kind of have been looking forward to whatever is ahead. So slowing the whole thing down, even with like the swaddling rather than dressing them, slowing it down is good for both because it's such an extraordinary change where like there wasn't a human and now there is another human, right? And the cutting of the cord is symbolic, but it's slow. It's really slow, in fact, from when they are still part of the mother to when they're not so much. Yeah. And the body takes time to produce the milk, and the body, as you said, takes time to return to, familiar sizes, and it's never going to be the same, unless, again, you go to another doctor and put plastic stuff in your body. But it's never, after like 2 years of breastfeeding, you're not going to have those perky breasts. And, a woman gets to choose, like, whether or not it's worthy to her to, to be an object or a subject.
I think that you made an interesting comment, saying that you're not going to be the same. So yes, in a way, your body is not going to be the same, but you can get that. I mean, I feel I was athletic through school. I danced, I have a dance minor. So I was a fit kid. Your body has muscle memory. So that's, of course, much easier for someone who has been active and athletic all their lives. And then they have a baby to find that muscle strength again. But I feel I look even better postnatally after birth.
Me too.
Because I do have more curves. I have, your hips get wider, your rib cage gets wider, your stomach, your sides of your waist get thinner. And you can do all that naturally. You don't need, I help women who have diastasis recti, which is a separation of the abdominal wall. And many medical doctors would say, oh, well, you just, come back in and we'll mesh that and sew it up. You don't need to mesh or sew anything up. Like your body can naturally heal itself. You just need somebody that is knowledgeable enough to do that properly and not, have a baby and then go to boot camp, because that is definitely not the way you recover your body postnatally in a healthy way. And, I think, again, a lot of stigma needs to go away from that. I'm not going to look the same, or I'm not going to look good, or you can. Your body has a way of healing itself really easily. Down there's like a rubber band. It just bounces right back into place. You're going to be okay if you make the safe, conscious decision to recover naturally and with someone who is a specialist in that. So, I don't want any mother to ever think that they're going to have to, put some type of foreign objects inside them to fix them, or that they're never going to be able to jump on a trampoline again, or that, it's something from behind's not going to work anymore. It's a moment actually when we start to add these surgical operations or these medications. Why do women tear mostly? Because they can't feel their birth, because they're pushing. Why do they have a hernia? Why do they have a prolapse?
That's right.
These are all happening because some doctor who's supposed to know what they're doing told us, let's numb you down there. So then when you're ready for that baby to come out naturally, the baby doesn't come out naturally. So
that's right. That's all so true. Yeah.
We create,
even like what you talked about, which we in common words, call incontinence. in case it wasn't clear, it does pass, but we gotta be patient. Part of it, I think, is that we're so used to like this instant gratification thing. Okay, done, next. Yeah.
We are. Yeah. That has a lot to do with our consumer culture, and also to the digitization of our day-to-day lives. Our concentration is getting shorter and shorter, so even in terms of how you market your business, how you sell a product, it's got to be fast, quick, because you've lost people's train of thought a little bit due to the cognitive difficulties you have from looking at digital devices all the time. That's one reason. And then the other reason is, of course, because our digital devices have gotten faster and faster and faster. So we have to keep up and keep up and keep up. But that changes everything in terms of natural processes, from farming, from raising agriculture, to having babies. We all want to do it all fast, quicker, and that's not going to give you the natural, sustainable.
The process is the best. It's the dance, not the. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think it's very apropos for like Earth Day. We do celebrate nature in this conversation. Sure. Yeah,
and the Mother Earth.
Yeah,
and the mother there that are for continuing our future, because we make all our mothers infertile, and due to these chemicals are making only women who are having girls, then we're going to have a serious crisis on our hands.
The issue here is the value of motherhood, and revaluing the true worth, of Mother Nature and of Mother Woman, and appreciating woman for mother rather than woman for sex object or turn on, or hot babe or bride, or everything bad. And appreciation includes respect and financial reward, somehow paying for the mother's work, I think would make a big difference in our accountability, as you called it.
That is actually what the current administration is working towards. Giving mothers some money for having a child like they do in Europe. I mean, there's a logical reason behind that.
Yeah.
Not just because you've brought a child in the world, but it's a long-term goal. Again, back to goal. It's looking at the child as a long-term vision for the society as a whole. So if you want a child to thrive, you've got to make sure the mother is okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And the mother, has time to be with her child. Be a mother. Yeah.
Instead of go back to a couple weeks later.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Beautiful.
Yuri,
beautiful. Lots of love.
It's been a wonderful discussion.
Yeah. And lots of love to everyone out there who is listening. Come back to us with questions and topics. And until next week, keep speaking sex. If I could make love incessantly, I would be God.